Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. So we're going to get started. So as some of you might know, I'm Dr. Porto, a natural yoga instructor on she's recently joined our team at My Wellness Chiropractic. So she holds a Bachelor of Dietetics and Nutrition, a post-graduation diploma in Functional Sports Nutrition, and advanced diploma in naturopathy, and diploma in remedial massage. And she's also an advanced yoga and meditation teacher. So she's so knowledgeable and has an experience of over a decade. And we're so honored to actually have Fabiana as just a brief intro about the purpose of tonight's talk. In light of the current pandemic, obviously, and to do our best to enforce our immunity during this stressful time. We know that even, in today's information age, there's so many information out there, which, it makes it confusing and it makes it hard for us to know what is the best thing, which can help us to stay healthy. So we get these questions a lot of the times, and which is why we thought, why not? We run a talk around this topic to be able to answer some of, your most common asked questions. So here we are. I'm going to pass it on to Fabiana, and I'll try to ask your questions as we go along, but feel free to ask questions if you need to.
Thank you very much, Nat. It's a pleasure to be part of your team. And as you mentioned, it's such an important topic at this stage. I believe all of you will benefit from this talk. What I'll do is I'll push through specific topics, which I think are very essential for us to navigate. And we're going to be touch basing on different questions at the end. So we're going to be doing a few of the main questions. If you'd like to address at the end, that would be great. So just take notes if you like. And through the talk, me and Nat will be interacting with specific topics that we think are very essential for you to absorb, and just make sure that you take that on board. So first of all, I'd like to say that the brain has a very specific way of functioning when it comes to nutrition, and it's essential that we look after which kind of foods that we're taking and the sources, specifically talking about organic foods and processed foods and even plant-based diet, because the brain has these wonderful way of navigating through producing hormones, producing responses, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's got the same ability to eliminate toxins. So we know these days that even bacteria, the pathogens that live in the gut, they can actually go up towards the brain. They can actually enter the brain barrier, promoting a lot of different responses in the body that not always are completely known to everyone. So at times of stress, there is a major need to look after your health. Also because the stress being a long-term response in our case, it's not something that it's short-term. It's not something that it's looking like we're going to be dealing for a few days. And obviously this has brought up tremendous stress in many different ways for people. So considering the long-term stress, what happens is that the nervous system gets overstimulated. So when we have a nervous system overstimulated, it can actually go into this response of either being overused or completely depleted on function. So that's when we see the rising of anxiety and depression coming up as an outcome, as a result for either too much stimulation or lack of nutrients, lack of support, lack of recovery from the stress. So, most of us are very familiar with the symptoms of anxiety and depression. I believe all of us would have experienced these at some stage. And we all know as well, like if we want to feel good, sometimes, mostly for women, we go and we take some chocolate and that instantly makes us feel good. The same way with coffee, we know the response that gets in the body, that gets in the brain, we have that instant reactivity to it. So we know, by experience, that the brain responds very quickly to whichever food we take. And in this regard, for instance, when it comes to stress, the muscles and the nerves, they get a long-term usage with the stress hormones, which makes them overuse the nutrients. So that's why in times of stress, it's very essential to upgrade. So upscaling your intake into very good sources of food. It's not just eating more in quantity, it's eating better quality foods. So I know that it's been very hard for us here in Australia to even find specific foods at the supermarket. At times we go and the shelves are empty, and we see ourselves buying different things just because, what if it's not there, or we just feel the urge of having more sugary items or fried foods or processed foods because stress is so big. We're not able to think very quickly or very responsively to what actually makes sense in nurturing the body. We just, we grab whatever it is in front of us, or what's available at the supermarket at that day. So, for instance, I'm going to start with water, which is a very specific topic. So the brain has majority of its format made of fat. So 60% of the brain is made of fat, and the rest, it's a mixture of protein and water. The water is also, basically occupying majority of the body. So the body surface, inside the body, we have a lot of our body components dealing and needing water all the time. But specifically in the brain, every chemical reaction that happens in the brain relies on water. So I'm talking about energy production, memory, concentration, cognition, intellect, making informed decisions, or, even questioning or feeling things. This is all related to water-based chemical reactions. So in terms of water, when we have just a general, intake and a general basis, we generally go through about 2% of water loss on a regular basis, because that's what happens through urination, perspiration, just normally. And 2% of dehydration can already impair on, very basic functions such as memory, such as, having the ability to respond well to stimulation, to, have an appropriate behavior, appropriate response to a stimulus. And that includes brain fog and brain, lack of concentration and lack of ability to even switch off when you're trying to sleep, for example, in the mind, it's overcast and it's not, non-stop talking. These are all signs that there is some dehydration happening in the body. And all of us, have this tendency of leaving the hydration with water, let's say specifically, whenever we feel the thirst, we feel we feel thirsty, or we feel that we need to have a drink of water. But the sign of thirst, it's actually already a sign of dehydration. So we don't need to wait to feel thirsty in order to have a glass of water.
Well, tell us more about, the water consumption, Fabi. Like, what's the actual, normal daily intake? Like, how many glasses of water should we take? Because I'm sure, it's a question that most of us will have. How many glasses of water it's normal for us?
Sure. So on average, I would say that 8 glasses of water would be, ideal at a minimum. So I'm talking about average person with, an average weight. It's not under or overweight. And 8 glasses of water, it's actually for countries that are not going through, let's say, major heat. So hot temperatures would definitely require more water intake, such as tropical countries or desert countries. Also, if you're taking medication on a regular basis, you would need more water, because most medication will be also stimulating the dehydration. It stimulates you to be, urinating more often. Also, it goes through more cycles of filtrating the blood. If you're an athlete or an active person, you're more likely to need more water as well through more perspiration. And if you're elderly, or if you have gone through, specifics on hormones such as menopause and even teenagerhood, you need more water. So the more hormones you have circulating in the body, the more you need water. But elderly people don't actually have the same sense of thirst that we still have as part of the age group of until 60 years old. So basically, once you pass 60 years, the ability to actually dictate or to, notice the thirst is differentiated. You don't have the same stimulation in the brain. So it's very essential to keep an eye on elderly people to make sure that they're actually taking enough water, because they don't feel the same need as most people would. Yeah.
Absolutely. Great.
Yeah, so that's okay. So other than obviously water as such, I'm also going to be touch basing on the specifics that could also help to hydrate the body, such as coconut water, aloe vera juice. So the natural sources of aloe vera, not the ones that come with sugar or anything else added, but just the pure straight aloe vera juice, which is also very good to hydrate the inside lining of your intestine. So that's protective, and that's very helpful to soothe any kind of ulcers or any kind of imbalances with bacteria in the gut. Aloe vera helps a lot with that too. Also, allowing the cells to absorb the water. And apart from these, in Australia, we have these very common sense that tap water, it's okay to be taken, and it's actually stimulated, by some people. But in my perspective as a naturopath and as, a holistic dietitian, what I feel is that it's probably something that you have to be very mindful and very careful of. Fluoride, it's presented in water, so tap water doesn't have the same filtering that we would if you were to use a normal filter at home, or activated charcoal filter or something like that. So there is still fluoride in the water, and they actually add the fluoride in order to, they say, preserve, against tooth decay and all sorts of, impairments that could come from that. But fluoride has a major impact on thyroid. So if you are someone who is experiencing thyroid issues, and especially female bodies, because we have, again, more hormones circulating, and thyroid is essential to regulate energy, to regulate metabolism in general, plus all different hormones, fluoride coming from tap water won't be helping you. So there's a lot of people that actually feel thirsty after having tap water because it doesn't seem to nourish the body. And so I highly recommend just to stay away from tap water if you can, and getting yourself a filter that you can attach to the sink, or even the ceramic filters that they actually sell it at Bunnings, or having some sort of different system in the house, such as activated charcoal, or getting some spring water. It's actually a good idea as well. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So other than the water, which is very important, something else that comes to mind when we think about preserving the brain cells and preserving its health, it's the fat. So I'm not talking about any specific fat, any particular, I'm not talking about the big fat as a group, but also more specifically on omega-3 and omega-6 intake. So it's very unlikely that we will go through more omega-3 than average people. And most people don't really realize that omega-6, it's very common, a lot more common in the diet than omega-3. And omega-6, even though has we need the omega-6 still, we need the balance between omega-6 and omega-3. So both work towards a good balance of good fats in the body and in the brain. But the omega-6, it's considered to be pro-inflammatory. So it creates more inflammation, as opposed to the omega-3, which is anti-inflammatory. So it protects against excessive inflammation. So when it comes to foods that would actually be, providing inflammation, or that would be considered sources of inflammation, it's very easy for us to relate, because for most people that know about, a balanced, healthy diet, they would understand that these are the foods that would not belong to this group. So, for instance, red meat, for instance, fried foods, processed foods, sugary items, even soda drinks and things such as alcohol, they will all be related to inflammatory foods. And so when it comes to the omega-3 support, we need to be very mindful and very consistent on the intake, because the omega-3 could definitely make a difference on the long term, especially in protecting or preventing the surfacing of, impairment of cognitive diseases such as Alzheimer, for example. So omega-3 has a very big difference when it comes to people that take a regular diet, including all sorts of meat, because the omega-3 comes majority from fish and seafood. So I'm talking about, different fishes such as salmon, sea bass, mackerel. You can also find it in oysters, seafoods, including shrimps, including, crabs and that kind of thing. But we don't really take a lot of attention when it comes to vegetarian people, because seeds such as linseeds and chia seeds, they would still provide the omega-3, as well as, for example, a few nuts, some olive oil. They would all be, presenting omega-3 sources, but it's a different kind of omega-3. So there is a specific one, which is the DHA, which is what we find in fish oil capsules. And there is the ALA, which is what we find in the vegetarian sources. So even when we go to chia seed capsules or linseed capsules or, vegetarian-based capsules of omega-3. The main thing here is that the ALA, the type of omega-3 that comes from vegetables, it's actually, to be converted into the DHA, it loses 70% along the way. It's lost. So we need to be very consistent when it comes to intake of good sources of omega-3, specifically if you are vegetarian. So in that sense, you would have to upgrade your intake of chia seeds, of linseeds, of hemp seeds, and also being very mindful of taking the seaweeds and things from the ocean that don't necessarily come from the seafood, the actual fish or seafood. It doesn't have to be from seafoods. It could be seaweeds or nourish seeds, nourish sheets, or the little sushi sheets that we roll, that's a nourish sheet. Or it could just be different ones, those flakes and things like that you can use in the general cooking. Yeah. So do you want me to go through any specific quantities, Nat, for omega-3?
Great. Yes, that was my questions, especially for vegetarian and vegans. To know what is the actual, what's the amount, what's the daily intake, normal daily intake that it's, recommended.
Yeah. So for, according to recent studies, and for most people, that would also make a huge difference, as I said, when it comes to reducing the cognitive impairment. So that has been proven to actually reduce at about 70% your cognitive impairment if you take about 4 grams of omega-3 a day. So 4 grams could be equivalent to 4 capsules. When it comes to fish oil capsules, they're usually 1 gram size. If it's a chia seed oil, if it's a linseed oil, you might just have to make it double, because it's usually a 500 milligram. And also remembering that, for instance, a specific beans such as edamame beans, kidney beans are also good sources of omega-3 for vegetarians. So keeping a regular intake of seeds and beans on a general basis. 4 grams doesn't have to come just from capsules. It could be a mixture of supplements and food sources. Yeah. So yeah, so 4 grams is a good quantity. Yeah. So now touch basing more on specifics that are going to be related to the gut. So I I can imagine that most people have already heard or had to use before some probiotics. For example, probiotics are very much common and used after you use antibiotics, or if you have gone through surgery, or if you're feeling just, sick in general and you just take probiotics to prevent from worsening the symptoms or to get better quicker. So probiotics are the good bacteria. They're there to promote balance, to, counteract with the pathogens, the bad bacteria, the toxins, and everything else that comes, with our intake and even exposure to chemicals and things like that. They also bring in pathogens. So the probiotics are considered to have a major impact when it comes to the brain, also because they are going to be protecting the lining of the internal lining of the intestines, which is where we produce in the intestine. We are actually able to produce 90% of our serotonin. So serotonin is a major component of the mood, and specifically feeling good mood. So it's a hormone, and it comes with the sensation of feeling calm and collected and happy. So considering that there's a lot of people that have troubles in having a regular bowel function and not having necessarily any specifics on, any kind of health issue related to that, it's more the dietary that it's not very balanced. We can definitely help with these, not just by using the probiotic, but also, for instance, feeding the probiotic. You need to have specific foods that feed the probiotics, and they're called prebiotics. And also not just the prebiotics, but we need to have fiber. So there's three components there. So there's the probiotics. Probiotics doesn't necessarily need to come from capsules, and you don't have to take the probiotics just if you're feeling sick. So the probiotics come from any fermented foods. So for example, kimchi, sauerkraut, yogurts, good quality yogurts would have good sources of probiotics, kefir as well. Specific cheeses, mostly the soft cheeses like cottage cheese and that kind of thing. But also with the probiotics, they can't survive on their own. So it doesn't matter if you're just taking capsule after capsule and you're feeding your body with processed foods and, let's say, frozen foods and lots of sugar, lots of alcohol, lack of water. You need prebiotics, and the prebiotics are going to be feeding specifically this bacteria. The prebiotics come from foods that have a sweet aftertaste. So, for instance, we can relate to onions. It doesn't actually ring a bell when we think about, but if you think, further on, you're going to remember that there is a little sweet aftertaste. So beetroot, garlic, asparagus, artichokes, bananas, oats, they're all good sources of prebiotics, and they're very easy to be, taken on a regular basis. You don't need to take a whole onion a day. It's just, at least a little bit every day. Yes. Specific foods. If any of you girls can unmute your, can actually mute your microphone, that's going to be easier. I think it's just, I'm receiving different sounds here. So the prebiotics, they're very essential. And when it comes to the gut, relationship with the mood and with feeling good and reducing the stress, we can't forget about the fibers, because the fibers will also be creating this kind of protective net. So for instance, not just fibers from vegetables, but also whole grains. So if you're choosing to eat rice, prefer to have the brown rice instead of white. Why? Because the actual structure of the grain will have more fibers, which is going to be reducing the impact of the glucose in the blood, which again has a very close relationship with cortisol, which is the stress hormone. So the more sugar you give to the system, and that could be sugar from, anything that it's white, so refined carbohydrates coming from flours, coming from even white potato or, white rice, anything that it's related to carbs, breads, biscuits, pasta, anything. brings about the response straight away in the system. So it releases insulin, but insulin has a very complicated, let's say it's adverse relationship with cortisol, which is the stress hormone. So when you're dealing with too much stress, there's a lot of cortisol in your system and it doesn't seem to be going down. So sugar doesn't get processed in the same way. It's not as effective. The system becomes ineffective because the cortisol, it's stopping insulin from working effectively. So fiber helps to minimize the impact that the sugar would have in the blood. So minimizes the instant peak of glucose and instant response of insulin, because it allows the sugar to be absorbed gradually. So the response in the body, it's also gradual. And for you to reduce the cortisol, what you have to do, it's very essential to have enough protein in the diet. So protein coming from good sources of protein. So not just protein from meat, from chicken and seafoods, and not just from eggs or dairy foods, but also from vegetable sources, such as quinoa, such as different beans, chickpeas, lentils, peas, nuts, bee pollen, chia seeds. They're all sorts of protein-based, vegetable sources of protein. And the fiber, it's there to help, not just to address, this impact of glucose, but also to protect the fact that there could be lots of different toxins and lots of different inflammatory foods. So when we think about how to minimize the impact in the body, it's starting in the gut, and from the gut, that's what's going to go into the blood. So to reduce that, fiber and antioxidants work together. So the antioxidants foods are going to be there to assist on minimizing the stress impact, what we call the oxidative stress. So it's the stress that comes from, environment, or for instance, what we're going through now. There's lots of different news that we read. There's a lot of different information that comes along, and this naturally produces stress. So the oxidation, so the cells are all being very exposed. You're feeling vulnerable right now because there is a non-stop flow of information, and it's very heavy to digest this kind of information. So antioxidants will be there to protect you. What are the antioxidants? So for instance, the berries, foods such as olive oil, coconut oil, cacao, spirulina, chlorella. They're very good in promoting these barrier, chia seeds and linseeds as well, protecting and just making sure that the body is having some sort of, escape. It's somehow the body has this understanding, even when it's still under stress, that there is, some hope, that there is an ability to grab from the antioxidants and protect the cells so the cells don't get all damaged, because that's what happens. The stress brings about a lot of acidity towards the environment in the blood. It reduces your pH, so you're more susceptible in being infected or becoming ill. I'm not just talking about specific virus, I'm talking about general immune system. So if your pH becomes low, and that's again coming from foods such as refined carbohydrates or sugary foods, red meat, alcohol, excessive amounts of coffee, anything that relates to processed will be related to anything that is industrialized. So all these foods will be reducing the ability of the body to stay protected, which again belongs to this stress response. It belongs to this place where the stress becomes even greater. So that's why it's so important for us to make sure that we have enough of the antioxidants and superfoods. So in the group of superfoods, most people have already heard of them. Superfoods could be, used in different recipes, and the superfoods, they are considered as such as a superfood when they have a lot of nutrients in one go. So for example, cacao powder, it's a very good superfood. It's got lots of iron, lots of magnesium, lots of vitamin B6, and so on. So that's a superfood. Spirulina, it's also a superfood. Chlorella, it's a superfood. Barley grass is a superfood. So different, foods that would be adding a lot of different nutrients will be considered that. So to start your day, for example, you can have a little shot with a bit of water, let's say 100 mils of water, a dash of lemon, squeezed lemon, and a teaspoon of super green. So that's already going to be protecting the blood, protecting the body in getting overly acidic. So the stress will be more likely to create acidity in your blood. And by taking the super greens in the morning, you minimize that impact. And so you create a better chance of you to recover through the day. So essential to minimize cortisol levels right at the start of the day, because the cortisol, it's the stress hormone, and that's what makes you wake up. So the minute that you wake up, cortisol levels are very high. This is for all people. If you don't take any protein or any sort of vitamin C right in the morning, and protein could even be a chia pudding, for example, it's a very good way of reducing the cortisol, chia specifically, and coconut milk as well. So by reducing this impact, by using the protein and the vitamin C, you reduce the cortisol. If, on the other hand, you decide to take a toast with jam and butter, or you have a croissant, or you have a piece of cake, or whatever it is that doesn't have protein at all, but it just adds carbs, that's going to be adding more cortisol into your system. It's going to stimulate straight away the response to go even higher. Chances are your day will be constantly based on a high level of cortisol, which is not good at all. So for us to minimize the cortisol, we need to make sure that there is enough good sources of protein, there is enough water, and there is enough vitamin C. So it could be vitamin C sources, vitamin C capsules, any kind of supplement based on vitamin C. Yeah. Any questions, Nat? I know I talked quite a bit.
Line with the processed foods that you've mentioned before, because I know that there are some processed foods out there that we don't even realize that they're processed. Can you name some of them, a few of them that will help us choose wisely, or when next time we go check the ingredients and be more thoughtful of the choices that we make.
Yeah, absolutely. So processed foods are anything that comes in a pack which has been industrialized, and it doesn't have to be very complicated to be processed. For instance, if you have a tomato paste, which is, it says on the label, it's just tomato, yeah, so but it comes in a can, that's already processed food. Or any kind of sauce, any kind of, for instance, the tins that we have here, like tinned canned beans or canned chickpeas or canned lentils, they're all processed. Yeah, they have preservatives in there to make sure that they're still alive. Alive as I mean, still eatable. So anything that has got conservatives, preservatives, additives, anything with numbers, anything with colors. So sometimes we think that we're doing good by giving the kids some yogurt, but at the end of the day, you come and check the label. There's a lot of different numbers. There is a lot of coloring, and there is a lot of sugar. So that kind of yogurt, it's not going to be nice. And when it comes to processed foods, the main thing is to check the label. So have a go at the label. Obviously, the obvious, obviously the foods that are noticeably processed, such as frozen burgers or frozen pizzas or fries or any chocolates or anything like that, they're already processed. It's a very straightforward answer. But when you think about these other foods that could be vegetable sources, but they have been processed somehow to stay there. So for instance, long life milk is a processed food. So you could just be getting yourself almond milk and still be having, an impact. So better off you make your own nut milk if you can, having those little bags. And just making sure that you have fresh nuts, and even better if you can get organic foods, and then you can just make your own milk at home. Yeah. So that's very interesting, and most people don't actually realize. We think that we eat so healthy, even when we go and do our shopping in health food shops and places like that, we can still be very much affected by long-term results and stress. For now, it's something that doesn't seem to be, leaving anyone alone. So yeah, I'm very mindful that this is going to be, making a difference for when we all exit from this situation. Yeah, so having a good food intake. Just to sum up what I have touched base here, I think that it's very essential for us to understand that there is also things such as foods rich in tryptophan, which are going to be very helpful to support a good mood and to support a good calming response towards the stress. So tryptophan is a amino acid that it's going to be bringing the ability of reducing the agitation in the body. So for instance, having the brown rice or having avocado, having a piece of banana with a bit of cinnamon and some oats, just before bed, or having that as a snack on the afternoon if you're feeling very agitated, helps a lot to reduce the stress. So having a look into foods that are going to be rich in tryptophan are going to be very helpful. And just to name, a few more, you could have, for instance, chicken, egg, fish, cheese. They're all rich in tryptophan, but I'm very conservative when it comes to, prescribing dairy and that kind of stuff. So if you can stay away from dairy and processed cheese, that's even better. But yeah, checking for long-term use of, say, dates instead of chocolates as a snack if you're feeling for, if you're craving for sugar, because sugar it's going to be impacting a lot on your mood and on stress levels. The more sugar we give to the body, the more stress response we have. So I don't think it's going to be any helpful in feeding the craving. And so just be mindful of how much you're eating, how much you are actually chewing the foods, avoid having any liquids as you're having your meals, and just be mindful of having enough, intake of fresh fruits and veggies rather than just having all frozen. As most people seem to be, navigating towards that now, especially for, we don't know what's going to happen, if the supermarkets will be open or closed. So I think just as a matter of time, we only have 5 more minutes. So I really want to open up just to any general question, if anyone wants to, raise a hand. And I'll also leave here before I open to the questions, if you want to write down my website and my email so you can get in touch with me. I provide online consults at the moment. I'm doing all online. So I'm very open to receiving new clients at this stage. And what I do is I come up with a personalized treatment plan, which includes naturopathic herbs and supplements, as well as doing a nutrition personalized plan. So that will be tailored to your needs. And what we do is we go through, a clinical history, and we go through a very comprehensive plan to make sure that we're meeting your goals. So later on, I'll be, joining Nat physically at the clinic. Just at the moment, we're doing all online. So feel free to, touch base with me if you're having any more questions after this talk. So my email is the same one I sent you the invite for this meeting. So hello@therawyogini.com. And the website is www.therawyogini.com. Okay. So also just having here my Instagram, if you have any questions. I'm always posting things on interesting items on Instagram, and it's Fabi Porto Yoga. So all together. So questions, anyone? You can just unmute your mic. You don't have to be shy. So if no questions are coming up now, and I know there's a lot of, there was a lot of talk to absorb. That's fine.
It was actually very, precise and thorough. So thank you so much for sharing the knowledge. I'm sure, it will help us, better help us, choose a better diet, and maybe when we go shopping next time, we'll make a better choices, I guess, in terms of what we get and what we want to buy and what we keep, in our pantry.
Mm, yeah, and in fact, going back into this topic, what to get at the supermarket, it's nice to, you know, make sure that you have enough protein. So even if you don't really have that on a general basis, make sure that you're stocking up. And I always go for the dried ones. So dried lentils, dried chickpeas, dried kidney beans, dried cannellini beans or black beans if you can find them. Dried mushrooms are very good too. So in the Asian section, you find the dried mushrooms. You can also get enough quinoa, coconut flakes, almond meal, and, you know, different ways of having nuts. So you could be nut butter, it could be tahini, it could be any of these, you know, sources, that protein powders as well. They're very good and very helpful, especially for, you know, these times where we need protein on each and every meal. So it's very essential that you have protein morning, afternoon, and night. And especially if you are having some carbs, do not attempt to have carbs by themselves. So even if it's, you know, a piece of fruit, have some nuts with it, or have some nut butter, or have, you know, something else that would add some fiber and protein, because the chance of you rising your cortisol just by having the carbs on their own, it's very high. Yeah. So yeah, so I'd like to thank all of you for coming here. It was very lovely to, you know, present some of this topic, which I actually really enjoy. It's my passion to talk about nutrition, and been doing this for so long, I don't even feel this is a work for me. So thank you again. Thanks everyone. I hope you have a lovely night. Again, if you need to touch base or ask me any further questions, do not hesitate to get in touch.
Thank you, Fab.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very comprehensive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fabiana. It was great.
Thank you. I appreciate.